Welcome to the World Economic or the pre-World Economic Forum breakfast that is happening here in Sandton. This is ahead, of course, of Davos 2025. And joining me now, I'd like to welcome the CEO of First Rand Bank, Mary Vilkazi. Ms. Vilkazi, thank you so much for joining us. Just listening to the press conference earlier on, there is a sense of optimism, but how do you manage that optimism with a bit of caution given the global economic aspect?
Thank you very much for inviting me to the conversation. Let me not take over your mic. So we're very cognizant of the challenges and the current state of the economy. We're cognizant of the fact that currently the growth in the economy, I think the challenges still in the transport logistics sector are there. But I think what's critical and I think what is different is that there is at least a plan of action that we can see that continued delivery on that plan of action is going to result in growth really in South Africa that we haven't had. And I mean, this plan of action is also not new because I think if you look at the economic reforms that started when there was no electricity, I think that's been sustained. The government didn't say, okay, now that we no longer have load shedding, electricity is no longer a priority. So I think the legislation that's been put in place now, which on the electricity point of view, should enable a creation of opportunities for private sector to come in, certainty, So I think it's it's the achievement of those milestones and the fact that that momentum continues, and then that the plans are quite ambitious. I mean, I think to think in 10 years' time, if we listen to the electricity plan and what the Minister of Electricity is trying to solve to, I mean, that will be doubling our current electricity generation. So the fact that we're not only just solving problems, but actually we're looking ahead to what the country needs. You could say that we need that kind of energy, that kind of structure in aligning the actions between what policy says and what the execution looks like. Private sector players across various sectors. So I think the electricity one has been a good template. And I think from a business point of view, our message is to say, well, let's replicate this in many other sectors. So obviously transport and logistics is quite high up. It's quite urgent because of the impact on the economy, but that's receiving attention. So we're cognizant of the problems, but I think it's good that the government is also honest and clear about what the problems are, and it recognizes that the only way to turn around the country is if the economy grows. That's been a point that was not such a priority in the past, and they've really prioritized economic reforms, which in the long run will see the creation of jobs and will see us as a thriving nation again.
You speak about cognizance. A lot of business concerns heading into last year's elections was the macroeconomic policies of South Africa. Do you feel with the government of national unity there's been a change, and how so in terms of the confidence level?
So, from a macroeconomic point of view, we're very fortunate to have the Reserve Bank. I think the role that the Reserve Bank has played when inflation really was rampant, I think they've played that responsibly. We are seeing inflation come down, so that should result in an environment that is more supportive for interest rate cuts. So that's one challenge that we no longer have that we had last year when we were reflecting on the economy. Of course, what happens in the US matters a lot because if the Fed doesn't cut interest rates, that's going to flow into South Africa. But I think there should be other supportive factors locally that one can leverage. But, that's already changed from in December when we thought we were going to have 3 rate cuts of 75 basis points in total. Already now we think it might only be 25. So I guess what happens in the US, as much as we might have a lot of optimism, what's happening in the US is going to also play a role. And the other factor that I'll also just say is that I think beginning of last year, we still were experiencing load shedding. So the impact of energy or lack of energy on the economy was quite significant. And I think what really also is a strength of South Africa is that the fiscal discipline has also been maintained. I think, kudos to National Treasury and the Minister of Finance for holding the line. And then the last thing that I would also just highlight from a macroeconomics point of view that's changed is that the political stability, so post-elections, we've seen the risk premium. And so basically that is the rate, that impacts the interest rate that we pay as South Africa on the debt. We've seen that come down. So all those are active actions of National Treasury, resulting in a different macroeconomic outlook, where the sovereign, and we've actually had S&P ratings also confirm that South Africa's fiscal trajectory could improve. I think that positive signal from S&P matters. So, yeah, I think lots of factors that put us on a different footing, but obviously there's still a lot of structural impediments, and which is the economic reforms that I've spoken to that need to be unlocked really for us to actually get a lot more supportive environment from a macroeconomic point of view.
You need to run, Ms. Vilkazi, in 2 minutes. 3%, that's the target. If you listen to the panelists here talking about it, what is the deadline in terms of trying to reach the 3% given all of the economic challenges, not only within the country, but also globally?
So the 3% is aspirational. If you look at the outlook of what we're expecting in 25 to 27, because there we say, I think GDP growth is likely to be around 2%. That's where the estimates are. But faster delivery, but that does not take into account. You haven't been optimistic in making assumptions around delivery on the economic reforms. But I think sustained economic reforms, I think substantial changes in the transport and logistics, I think more reforms in the network industries, it's all those actions that could take us to a 3%. So, 2% is the likely estimate that I think based on current activity is what we think the economy can produce. But I think with really continued momentum in the execution, that's how we lift our GDP growth to 3, and we actually get the growth potential of the country even further lifted going forward.
Ms. Vilkazi, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me.